couple of questions in the break, and I'm going to cover one of those questions now, which is if a person has a saviour complex and wants to save everyone, on a Sunday, how do you stop yourself? I don't have a cat, but the neighbour has a cat. And at around 5:30 in the morning, the cat starts to scratch at the door. And it's no good ignoring it.
Sorry, I forgot to say the number for the video.
Oh, okay.
هتدلي İsrail'im tişin ve şmarını kudarafes.
Tim, sorry, could you start the cat story over again? Because there's a lot of noise.
I understand. So, we haven't got a cat, but the neighbour has a cat. And the cat scratches at the door and starts meowing at 5:30, 5:45 in the morning. So we let her in. And she destroys things, and she's very affectionate, and she's from another realm. One thing that is very clear, if you're very fond of a cat, is the cat is very, very small, and the world is very, very big. And she likes having her neck rubbed and scratched, and there's a little fold of skin at the back of the neck, and she likes that being rubbed. And you feel how fragile a creature she is. My other half lies on the kitchen floor for half an hour, and they just stare at each other. I adore this cat. I could not let go of worry about what happens to her when she leaves the block, when she goes into the street, unless I had contact with a power greater than myself. The next thing I'm going to say is a view. If the view is useful to you, then feel free. If the view you object to, then don't worry about it. I believe that I am not my physical body. I happen to be living in this particular physical body right now. I've been in this physical body all day. But it is not who I am. And my physical body can be destroyed. And any extension of that, anything I identify myself with beyond my physical body in the material world, can be destroyed. I'll elaborate, and that will do it. So I'm not my physical body.
It's distracting to the people that are speaking English, so I need to move somewhere.
Okay.
It might be a little bit easier
And put me wherever you want to put me.
You have to have a group conscious on how to do that, otherwise it's going to be disturbing. It's disturbing everyone, but everybody wants to listen. Everybody needs to feel easier.
I'm not in charge of this one.
I would suggest, Jim, maybe people think about it, that if you would go over there in that corner, and the people who are English speakers, the Hebrew speakers could move over.
So if there are who are having trouble hearing and hearing the speakers, please move over here. אם יש דוברי עברית שרוצים לשבת לידם, אז אפשרי. בסדר? אז זה מה שנוכל לעשות כדי שכולם...
Turn your microphone up a little or speak a little louder because I'm trying to listen to you and then I speak and I hear myself but you're still speaking and so then it's complicated.
Okay. Tell me when to begin again.
And maybe if there's English speakers that I'm speaking too loud. It's going to be today.
It's going to be today.
Sorry.
Do not despair.
Are we ready? We're ready. Are we ready? Okay. So, to start this little segment again, I'm not my physical body. I'm not my assets. I'm not my house. I'm not my career. I'm not my country. I'm not my nationality. Those are things which I am next to, but it is not the essence of who I am. All of those things can be destroyed because they are in the material world. Anything in the material world can be destroyed. If I think that's ultimate reality, I have to be scared or psychotic or in denial. Those are the three options. I'll just run those through again. If I'm attached to anything in the material world, my three options are fear, psychosis, or denial. Or maybe being drunk would help too. But there's no way I can be happy. There is no way I can be useful. Because as soon as I'm frightened, I'm angry at whatever is causing the threat. And as soon as I'm angry, the way my other half describes it, it's putting an umbrella up on a sunny day. And I'm now disconnected from my source, and nothing good will happen. It's everything I do when I am disconnected from my source is like building sand castles on the beach. It may look like a castle, but no one is moving in anytime soon. And by the time the tide comes and the tide goes out, it's gone. So, back to the cat. The cat appears to be in the material world. Particularly when she's pulling the curtains down. But I recognize a spirit in her which can't be destroyed. And when I recognize that spirit, there's nothing to be frightened of. She's going to be okay, even if her physical form isn't. And this is true of all of the people in my life, that nothing real can be destroyed. If nothing real can be destroyed, I do not need to be frightened anymore. All of this appearance, I mean, thank heaven, it's not real. Yes?
Can something real be lost?
Sorry?
Can something real be lost to you? Lost?
I don't believe that anything real can be lost, but I cannot know it's there. And there's a difference. It can be next to me the whole time, but I can't see it. When I was 15 years sober, I found an incredibly useful spiritual book by, in this case, this one was by Anthony DeMello, Demello. Very, very useful. And I thought, why did no one give me this information before? And about 6 years after that, I took another book off my shelf, which I had bought and read twice when I was 2 years sober, which said exactly the same thing, but from a different angle. It was there the whole time, but I couldn't see it. So back to the original question of the martyr complex and the saviour complex, is that whoever appears to need to be fixed, they are all right already. They're fine already. But they're having some... הם כבר בסדר. Okay. So, but they are on some kind of journey on this material plane. And I don't get to choose what lesson someone else needs to learn. My question is simply to my higher power. Where do I go today? What do I do today? What do I say today to whom? And maybe the answer is nothing. And maybe their material world experience is not going to work out. And maybe that's fine, because they are fine. And there's a big difference. If I am too much in the material world, my feet and hands need to be in the material world. I'm not going to be able to find the quotation. It's not 120, it's 130.
Can you wait till I open my book?
Of course. Yes.
But I don't know if it's
Are the pages the same in Hebrew?
yeah, it should be.
Hold on, so it would be easier if we just find somebody to
Of
read it
course.
from the book.
Yeah.
And nice translation, please.
Where does it start? Where does the paragraph start from?
It's the first paragraph down. We have come to believe. 130. 130.
What's the edition of
They're all the same at this point. Yes. Yes.
4 lines.
So have we got it, Evan? So the paragraph starts with those of us who have spent much time, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines down. You got it now?
Well, I have it. It's already underlined for me.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm going to have Evan find it so he can read it.
Okay.
We've come to believe
Yeah.
you would like us to get that one.
Yeah. You ready, Evan?
Almost.
Okay. Amazing. Okay. So we've come to believe He, that's God, would like us to keep our heads in the clouds with Him, but that our feet ought to be planted firmly planted on earth.
Stop.
Got it, okay. So those are the two mistakes. That tells me what the two mistakes can be in the program. The first one is to be so concerned with what I think God's will is for me on the planet, I forget to actually have contact with that higher power, and I end up making God's will my will, which is a disaster, because then I start to exercise what I think are God-like powers. I've got to remain a servant at all times, which means I have to remember that God is the one who is in charge. And a good example of this is in sponsorship, where my job as a sponsor is to offer the program to people, and if necessary, to explain it. Now, sometimes the explanation won't work until they've done the action. Sometimes the explanation will help. Where I get crazy is where I start to convince someone or try to convince someone that I'm right, or persuade them to do something. And that's where the whole martyr-saviour thing comes in, so that I get to offer people things, but not then enter into an argument or shame or punish people for not getting it or not changing. And I make lots of mistakes in this area. I'm better than I was, but I'm not at all perfect. And it's always good in Al-Anon to have a little motto to repeat to yourself. If you repeat it to someone else, you're having an Al-Anon slip, so you just repeat it quietly to yourself under your breath. Let it break around you. And recently, let it break around you or next to you.
They're asking to explain that. It doesn't translate so easy.
What do you mean by that?
כמו גל מים שעולה
Oh, let the wave break
Like
around?
let it happen.
No. So
people are confused with
I understand. Okay, so in Al-Anon, or in my Al-Anon illness, I tend to notice what's wrong with everything and everyone around me. Mentally, I have a clipboard with lists of all the things that need to be fixed. Sometimes I wake up and there isn't enough on the clipboard, so I listen to the news on the radio, and now the clipboard is full again of all the things that need to be fixed. And I will actually believe that me getting angry in my kitchen is going to help, and that if I don't get angry, I'm letting these things just happen. Now that shows the insanity, because they're gonna happen whether or not I'm angry in the kitchen. I don't know a lot about Israel, but I'll tell you something about the United Kingdom. The problems we're having are not because not enough people are angry. We don't need more angry people.
We have them, we can do
You have them, you have even in Jerusalem, on each of the 7 hills. So let it break around you. Whenever I notice something that is breaking, I mean, the two Al-Anon slips, the first one is to try to go in and fix it. The second one is to mentally complain to myself about all of the people whose fault it is that it's not fixed. They're both the same thing, spiritually. So let it break around you is simply to say, it's going to break, maybe it needs to break, maybe it needs to stay broken for a long time. But, God, is there anything that I constructively can do about this? Lots of American speakers tell very exciting stories about, the dead body they found in the room, and there's usually a gun goes off at some point in any American AA talk. You won't get any of those. Someone shot someone. So I've told you a story about the kitten. I'm going to tell you a story about a tree now. That's about as exciting as it gets.
I'm at the dead body in the room with the AA meetings in America, so after the dead body.
Okay, I'll pick it up. I'll pick it up from there. So the story is about a tree. I used to every morning sit on a particular chair in my flat, looking out over a bunch of trees. And one day I looked out, the trees were gone. And I'd been watching squirrels. Do you even have is there even a word? There is no word. There is a word. Why there's a word in Hebrew for squirrel, no one knows, but there is.
Maybe there are words for elephant also, but we don't have them.
I know, and it isn't even elephant. That's the weird thing. So, peel, is it peel? Yes, there you go. I know no useful words in Hebrew, but I know some strange animals, or at least the words for them. Where were we? Squirrels, trees, yes. So I was sitting on the chair. It's incidentally the chair where, when sponsees come to visit, they sit on that chair. And my other half refers to it as the naughty chair. The naughty chair is where you put the child that's been naughty to tell the child that's been naughty. So I was sitting on the naughty chair, and I immediately started to get angry. And I'm a letter writer. I write letters to complain, or at least I don't. Once a year I'm allowed. But I think I maybe called the school, and I found out the reason. It was in the grounds of a school. They were frightened about the trees falling on the children, and so they cut the trees down. Now, and this is an interesting point to me, about how to get over resentment. So when I have done harm, I need to make amends. If someone else does harm, amends are needed, but if they're not going to make them, maybe someone else can make them. So I found a charity. I arranged for an acre of trees to be planted. So now, in my book, The Universe is Balanced, this was something I could do. I didn't get involved in local politics. I didn't shout at the school. I just let that thing break. But then I I prayed, and that was the thing that I could do to help. Okay. So I'm going to talk about steps 2, 3, 4, and 5 between now and 1 o'clock. So if you need a little break, you can pace yourself, work out which step you want to miss. It says lack of power was our dilemma on page 45. Lack of first paragraph, first full paragraph from the top. What I said to you, 45. I'm going to do a lot of stuff with the book from now, so. Okay. So page 45, first full paragraph down. Lack of power, that was our dilemma. We had to find a power by which we could live. And it had to be a power greater than ourselves, obviously. But where and how were we to find this power? Well, that's exactly what this book is about. Its main object is to enable you to find a power greater than yourself, which will solve your problem. How many problems are there? One. There you go. What's my problem? Well, my problem, and thinking I'm the problem is the problem. Thinking there's something wrong with me is the problem. The problem is that I think there's something wrong with me. There's something wrong with my perception, but there's nothing wrong with me, which means there's nothing wrong with you, and there's nothing wrong with them. Everyone has a them. The list of people with whom there is something wrong, but there isn't. My problem is my perception of reality. Okay, I'm going to repeat that in a slightly different way and see if it comes through this time. We're about to have a changeover of the translators. So, my problem is not me. My problem is my belief there is something wrong with me and there is something wrong with you. And I can't relax if there is something wrong with me and something wrong with you. I have never been separated from God. Yes?
Just read that lack of power was our dilemma.
Yes.
That would be the problem.
Yes. Yes. So the dilemma is how are we going to solve the problem? But the problem is that I think I'm separated from God. I'm not separated from God. I never have been, but I think I am. I'm just going to pause briefly. We're having an exciting changeover.
Would you mind moving to that in the next room?
Move to the right.
Are you ready over there?
Yes.
Wonderful. Now, on one level, there is no point in telling someone you're not separated from God, you're fine, because you can understand it intellectually, but you're still frightened about what happens to the cat when she's on the road. and the two pieces of the broken ruler. You can't put the two pieces back together again. But it helps to know the direction you're traveling in. And so that's the problem that we're seeking to solve in the rest of the steps. When I'm reconnected to the higher power, I relax. When I relax, there's nothing left to fix in me. So I don't need to drink. And there is nothing wrong with you, so I don't need to fix, change, control, manipulate, punish. That's not a to-do list, by the way. Fix, change, control, manipulate, punish. The chapter 4 is very clever. It's going to ask us, and I won't be able to find the quotation. I can't find the quotation. It's somewhere in chapter 4 about believing that there is a higher power. There are two stages in step 2. First of all, I have to come to believe that there is one, and then I have to come to believe in one.
Is how it works?
No, it's definitely in We Agnostics. It's both in We Agnostics, but the line is not coming out. So,
there are good reasons.
Can you repeat the second step proposition?
yes. So let's not worry about the quotation. It's in there. Just trust me on this one. So first of all, I have to come to believe that there is a higher power. And then let's leave aside the question of whether I believe in a higher power. There is a difference. So you can believe that there is the American president, but that's different from believing in the American president. So the American president exists, but will the American president solve my problem? These are entirely different questions. And newcomers try and solve the second question before they solve the first one. So I needed to go to meetings and see that a higher power existed in your life, first of all. I occasionally get upset about things that happen in the world. This is one of the AA understatements. And I was really struggling with some stuff about 2.5, maybe 2.5 years ago. And I was at a conference, an AA conference in Arizona. And lots of other people around me were upset about what was going on in the world. Some of them were upset, 9 out of 10. Others were upset 2 out of 10. But everyone was upset. My sponsor's sponsor and his wife were upset. They have like 45 years of sobriety, and they do Course in Miracles the whole time, and they were upset. So useless. And I had breakfast with my friend Kurt. Kurt, do you know Kurt Z? He had been sober for 20 years. He slipped for 2 years. He's from Santa Monica. And he was at this point sober 2 years again. And I said to him, so with everything that's going on, how do you feel? And he said, I feel fine. I'm all right. And I looked in his eyes, and he was all right. He really was all right. There wasn't a flicker of fear or mistrust in him. I talked to my sponsor, and my sponsor also around the time said, things go in waves. They get better, then they get worse, then they get better, then they get worse. It has always been like this. If you read St. Augustine, or Augustine if you're a Protestant, Augustine if you're a Catholic, they can't agree. You think Israelis can't agree on things. Catholics, even amongst themselves, disagree on a few fundamental things. The pronunciation of Augustine. Writing at the end of the Roman Empire when the plumbing isn't working anymore. Things were bad. There were barbarians at the gate. You don't get to choose when you live. Everyone thinks their own time is the worst, apparently. But my sponsor was fine, and Kurt was fine. No one else was fine. But I saw that they had a working relationship with a power greater than themselves. And so I thought, you two today have what I want. Now the second part of this, moving from come to believe that a higher power exists to coming to believe that a higher power can save me too, is becoming easier and easier. All I need to do is identify with you. If any of you are biologists, you'll know that human beings, you take any two human beings, their DNA is 99.9% the same as the next person. And I think we're 96% the same as monkeys, and we're 90% the same as mice, and 60% the same as bananas. So back to humans. I'm 0.1% different than you. Do I really think that 0.1% genetic difference is going to mean that the power that created everything can help you but can't help me? Even if my argument is still holding up, I can have enough faith. Faith, here's a definition which helps me. Faith is the courage to take actions I don't believe in. Courage to take actions I don't believe in, because the person who is suggesting them is doing better than me. So faith is the courage to take actions I don't believe in, because the person who is suggesting them is doing better than me. And there's a line I'm going to quote from something else, if I can find it. You need not believe the ideas. You need not accept them. And you need not even welcome them. Some of them you may actively resist. I actively resisted a lot of ideas. I actively resisted the idea that I was okay. People would tell me that I was okay and I would feel physically sick. The quotation goes on. None of this will matter or decrease their efficacy. If I apply the ideas, they will work, even if I don't believe they will work. So someone says, yes, so the ideas will work if I use them, even if I don't believe them. If I apply them, they will work. The steps don't care why you take them. They're just fine. And what is true is true. It doesn't need me to believe it for it to be true. It doesn't become true because I've said, oh yes, it's true. But if I apply it, I start to realize it's true. And that's all that's required. That's the only faith that's required at the beginning of the step process, is enough courage to take the actions, and the action can be simply repeating a prayer over and over and over again, because it's better than the rubbish I'm already repeating over and over and over again. So sponsees will say, but I don't understand this prayer, I don't believe this prayer, I don't believe in God. Doesn't matter, because it's better than what you're currently whatever I'm saying to myself, I'm putting my faith in. Whenever I repeat a criticism of you, I'm increasing my faith in my ego and its perception of reality. I'm going to repeat that. Whenever I repeat in my mind a criticism of you, I'm increasing my faith in my ego and its perception of reality. I don't get to have a choice about whether to have faith. My question is, what am I putting my faith in? That's the only decision which I'm making. And so I decided in step 2 and in step 3 to put my faith in the people of the program. When it gets to step 3, a little word of why I need a power greater than myself merely to stay sober. About 10 years ago, I was walking along the Thames in London, and it was a hot day, and it's very, very humid, low cloud. I was exhausted with the heat. I was with, you're not supposed to have a favourite sponsee. I was with my favourite sponsee. We now talk once a year. And I saw someone with a glass of beer with little droplets of condensed water on the side of the glass of beer. And for a moment, it looked good. And my next thought was, if I grab that beer out of his hand and drink it, it'll be inside me before he realizes. Now, in that moment, a little prayer started inside me. I didn't make a decision to pray. A prayer started inside me. So my whole recovery needs to prepare me for that moment, so that a prayer starts automatically inside me, and within 5 seconds I was fine. Now, my higher power has granted me perfect release from alcohol for almost 26 years, with the sex, the romance, the Al-Anon stuff. We have had patient progress in being granted release by the higher power from the obsession to act out on my thinking. It's a lot better than it was. My friend Tom says that for every year of recovery, I get 1 extra second of reaction time. So now I have 26 seconds before I react. And have you ever been on the phone to the doctor's surgery that looks after your mother? Okay, there's this familiar and difficult situation. It's your mother, so it's important. Of course it's important. And of course they never cooperate. And there was some administrative problem. And I paused And I was pausing so long, she thought I'd put the phone down, so she put the phone down. But this pause time separated me from my ego for long enough that I didn't need to say something that I would then have to call back and apologize for later. Being restored to sanity, okay, most of the time my thinking is largely sane, but my sobriety doesn't depend on me being intellectually in charge of my life. Sanity to me means wholeness, which means I am a small part of my higher power. And I'm just going to read something else I found earlier. I say I found it, maybe it found me. And this is going to sound strange, but just let it sound strange. You can listen to the tape afterwards. Every human being gathers information from the center of a circle. If we are not careful, we soon think we are the center of things. Therefore, it is easy to become self-centered. Once we become self-centered, we start to think we are above all things and therefore superior. But we are really only one part of a great whole. The universe is all connected. Each part is here to do something special and according to its design. We are here to honor and respect the job of each part. We are neither above nor below anything. We need not be ruler over anything. We need only to live in honor and harmony with the system. To me, sanity is recognizing my real place in the universe, which is right here, right now, where my higher power wants me, doing whatever is in front of me to do. In sanity, I'm at the center, pulling the levers. The levers. I don't know that word. Pressing the buttons at the control panel. Okay. So the reason I need step 3, the reason I need a power greater than myself to be basically in charge, is that if I am in charge, I will drink again. I will do a bunch of other things. However, there's been a lot of bad news this morning about, the disease and so on. It gets worse. In step 3, on page 60, by the time you get to page 60, it's going to tell you, okay, you need a higher power in order not to die of alcoholism or anything else. Fine. But it's going to give us some other reasons for wanting to take step 3. And on page 61, the first full paragraph, the paragraph starts, what usually happens. And 2/3 of the way down the paragraph, it says, is he not a victim of the delusion that he can wrest satisfaction and happiness out of this world if only he manages well? That was in English. I'm going to put it in English. The way I understand that is, if I think I would be happy if everything went my way, I am wrong. When I was around 35, someone said to me, have you been trying to be happy your whole life? And I said, yes. And he said, are you Are you happy? Now, this should be a straightforward question. As an alcoholic, addict, Al-Anon, there are no simple answers to straightforward questions. Someone asked me yesterday how many brothers and sisters I had. I couldn't just give a number. The answer was complicated. Are you married? Are you Jewish? These are not always straightforward questions. Some people will give you very complicated answers. I give complicated answers to simple questions. If you get a simple answer from me, there may be more behind the answer. You just need to know that. So my complicated answer to your simple question of are you happy was, well, I'm a lot happier than I used to be. No. Are you happy? I'm happier than most people in my home group. No, that's wrong. You're answering the wrong question. One of my Al-Anon superpowers is the ability to read other people's minds and to work out the question they're really answering. When I was writing to I'm staying in a little hotel. When I wrote to the hotel, I asked, is there a coffee maker in the kitchen, like a coffee machine? And there was a long explanation in the answer about how coffee is made in Israel. I just needed a yes/no. That's all I needed. I'm not the only person that hears questions which weren't asked in the first place. Eventually, my answer to the question of are you happy was no. If there is anything wrong in the water, you don't want to drink the glass. You don't care that almost everything in the glass is fine. There's something wrong with the water. And at the age of 35, honestly, and yes, I was happier than I'd ever been. Yes, I was happier than most people I knew. But there was something wrong with the water. And the idea was presented to me. If you have been trying to be happy your whole life and you're not happy, when was your plan going to start working? Maybe you want to give up the plan entirely. Maybe if your plan came off, you wouldn't be happy anyway. And I've been in a position where my career is going fine. My relationship is going fine. None of my sponsees are drinking beer today. The bills are paid. There is work coming in. Everything, I'm at my ideal weight, everything. A friend of mine who has a few problems with food says that according to her disease, her ideal weight is her birth weight. When she gets back to that, she'll be fine. I've been in that position and woken up at 2:00 in the morning because the universe is expanding infinitely, and in several billion years' time, everything will be at absolute zero. And I'm not the only person that is worried by this. There is a Woody Allen film where this 7-year-old child will not do his homework because the universe is endlessly expanding and eventually everything will die, so what's the point? And an amazing principle that was given to me is you're not upset for the reason you think. So when I work through the list, you see you can use the steps to get what you want in the material world really effectively. If you do God's will as a byproduct, sometimes a lot of things will go your way. And you can be, I was fooled into thinking this is the answer. If enough things go my way, I'll be fine. And then everything is going your way and there is still a problem. So in your first column of your resentment inventory, you have, instead of, Susan for setting fire to my hair, it's now the second law of thermodynamics. I now have a problem with physics. It's the same resentment wearing a different hat. One minute it's Susan, the next minute it's physics. The next minute it's this prime minister or that prime minister. But the resentment is the same. If this were different, I'd be okay. If you were different, I'd be okay. If you were on time at least once a week, we would have a better relationship. If you learnt how to wash the dishes, I wouldn't be so tired. And none of it is true. The key line on page 61 is delusion. Is he not a victim of the delusion that if he gets his own way, everything is going to be fine? Now, this is too much for most people to hear in the first 10 years of recovery. Like, if you're an alcoholic, all you want to do is not be drunk, not have to pee on yourself in public, and then you'll be fine. You can get on with your job. You can meet someone, who's just come out of treatment. You'll have between 10 and 20 children. Everything will be fine. But file this information away, because it was true for me, and it was true for a lot of friends of mine. Somewhere between 8 and 10 years in recovery, one of two things happens. You've got everything you wanted, and there's still a problem. So you've now got a life that everyone else thinks is great, but you're waking up with panic attacks at 4 o'clock in the morning. Or you've got nothing that you wanted, and you realize you're not going to get it. So you're never going to be working for Hollywood or Bollywood. Neither of them are calling, and it's not going to happen. And you might just have to be like everyone else, and it's too much to bear. Some people hit it earlier, some people hit it later. Sometimes it's there, sometimes it's a shock. But this is a second surrender. And the journey to the second surrender was great. My first 8 years had a lot of fun, but there was a difficult patch. So now I have 2 good reasons for taking step 3. The first one is that I'm going to die if I don't. Okay, good reason. Enough. However, I'm going to bet all of my money and everything else on the right horse, which is, if you'll pardon the higher power being compared to a horse. That sounds bad, but God gets compared to all sorts of things in the Old Testament, some of them more appealing than others. God as the potter is great. God as the father, great. Some of the other ones work less well for me. So I think God is fine being compared to things. It's a way of understanding. You look beyond the metaphor. My life had to be placed in the hands of the one higher power. How do you let go of someone else? So that's putting my own life in the hands of my higher power. There's putting other people's. For me, imagery works. Pictures really help. And if I make the mistake of texting after 9 o'clock at night, if the conversation goes wrong, I'm still thinking about them when I'm trying to go to sleep. Like, if I explain it differently, maybe they'll understand. That one. I imagine them enclosed in a pink bubble and just flying up towards the higher power who is collecting everyone in pink bubbles. Sometimes the bubble pops, they fall back down, put them back in a bubble, send them up. It doesn't have to be pink. If you prefer another colour, that's fine. Pink bubbles, blue, as long as it's a bubble, bubbles work. But visualize the handing over. Visualizing the handing over really works. If you're familiar with Psalm 91, there's the image of the wings. So God is this huge bird with the wings over that you being protected, but you can imagine the other person being protected in this high place. So the second reason for putting my life in God's hands is because God will make a better job of it than me. God's plan for my happiness will work. God's plan for my happiness will work. We have a phrase in English, who knows if it exists in Yiddish or Hebrew or something else, don't put all of your eggs in one basket. Because if you drop the basket, all the eggs break, you have no eggs, we need eggs. Why? No one knows why we need eggs, but apparently we need eggs. So don't put all your eggs in one basket. Someone said to a friend of mine, Patri, who lives in the Canary Islands, amazing, they said to her about AA, because she was doing, when she joined AA, she joined AA. They said to her, don't put all of your eggs in one basket. And she was 3 months sober. And she said, I only have one egg. Which to me makes sense, because I think, because I'm, educated beyond my intelligence level, that my life has compartments. And so what happens over here in this part of the city, no one over there in that part of the city need know. She doesn't need to know what I said to him. They're all different. I can have one little corner of my life poisoned. I can afford that. Everything else is fine. And I will protect this little area. The thing is, my life is not out there. My life is inside my mind. And my mind is just one thing. There are no compartments in my mind. There are no barriers. Everything is connected. I poison one part, the whole thing gets poisoned. But it also means that every problem is the same size, because the problem is just a thought in my mind. Which is why if one problem can be solved, any problem can be solved. Because the problem is just a thought. There is no order of magnitude of problems. There's no order of magnitude of solutions. There is one problem and there is one solution. Back to step 3. So, how do I turn my will and my life over to God? For me, I have 2 levels of doing this. The first one is my basic attitude to my life. If you imagine a large company, and on the top floor of the office building, there is the boardroom where the directors sit and manage the business. As an out-of-control crazy person, I go up to the boardroom and argue with the directors, try to force the directors out of the room, or even go into the room in the middle of the night and start going through the filing cabinets looking for papers. Friends of mine This is not something I've done for a very long time, but because when I was doing it, we didn't have phones, we had locked cabinets. But to go through other people's papers, to go through their phone to see who they've called, to go onto the internet to see what sites they've been to. I know none of you have done that. Maybe you'll know someone one day who does. So, but that's me in self-will, is I don't know my place. My place is whatever my workstation is in the factory. And I have a boss in the factory, on the factory floor. That might be my sponsor. That might be whoever else is in authority in my life. And I get to follow the instructions that are in front of me. Maybe the boss is the instruction manual for the television I've just bought. I need to follow instructions, but I have a little earpiece in my ear, and I can call the higher power, the director of the firm, on the top floor whenever I want. So step 3 is about taking my real place in the world, which is head in the clouds with God, feet on the floor where the work is. And so I need to check in with God on a regular basis. How often is regular? 1,000 times a day will help. Just briefly. And then get on with the work. Pray, get on with the work. Pray, get on with the work. Scream, get on with the work. Pray, get on with the work. But there's a practical side to this. I lived my whole life under the influence not of a higher power, but of another power, the ego monster. And we need to get the ego monster out of the way. And the ego monster, it is related to the gorilla from the first session. If you weren't here in the first session, someone helpful will explain it, even if you don't ask. The ego monster needs to be gotten out of the way, and the knowledge that I need to get the ego monster out of the way is not sufficient. It is not open to persuasion. And if you get close to it, it gets vicious. If you try to get it out of the way, it will attack back. It will attack back with every piece of information you have available to you. It's been to all the meetings you've been to. It was there when your sponsor was giving you good advice. It will use everything and throw it back at you. If any of you watch horror films, there is some nodding, there is some shaking, there is some what's horror films. So there's a whole genre of exorcism films where someone is possessed by an evil spirit, and the priest comes along. In the exorcist films, it's always a priest, usually Catholic, never a Jesuit, Benedictine. And the priest tries to exorcise the evil spirit from the person. And actually there are two priests. There's the older priest that's done it 1,000 times, and the younger priest who actually has to do the work. It's really unfair. So the older priest says to the younger priest, don't listen to anything it says. And then the priest, the demon, will try to undermine the confidence of the priest by using every single weak spot. But no one loves you, and your father hated you, and your mother thought this of you. It will use everything against the priest to stop the process. It's exactly the same as, by the way, in if you know nothing about Harry Potter or you think it's evil, just don't listen to the next 2 minutes. and I can't explain it. It's too complicated to explain. If anyone knows the plot, when the Horcruxes are destroyed, the spirit of Lord Voldemort comes out and tries to undermine the person who is in the process of destroying the Horcrux. Same idea as in the Exorcist films. When I get close to my ego, that's exactly what happens, and it corners me and separates me. And one of the things that happens is it will make me physically ill. When you give step 4 to someone, they usually get physically ill, gastrointestinal or throat, one of the two. Occasionally skin condition, just for fun. But something that will cause them to have to stay at home and not be with other human beings for about a month. Because the ego knows that being with other people will overcome the separation. So I need to proceed very quickly through the remaining 6 steps of this process: 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. And on the bottom of page 63, it says next. Next. Is this practical side. We have to get on with the steps. So, a lot of people get by without the attitude side. They just get on with the steps, and that works for a lot of people. Men between 20 and 40 tend to prefer that, in my experience. They don't care about the spiritual stuff to start with. They just, where do I make the list? That's what they want to know. So step 4, there is nothing to be frightened of in step 4, because in step 4 I don't discover who I am, I discover who I am not. And the way I've heard it described is that we are like giant magnets. You know what magnet? Yeah. Okay, that's simple. You're like a giant magnet that has been dragged through the junkyard of life. And all of this junk is stuck to you, and you think you're the junk. And the standard example, some really bad things happened to me when I was 14, 15, at the hands of someone who should not have been near children. Let's just leave it there. And this happened around me, but not to me. I was there for the act. But I mistook myself for what happened and made it part of my identity. Lots of people I've talked to do this. They become the thing that happened to them, and they become the thing that they did. A very common response to bad things happening to you is shame. I felt a lot of shame for the things that happened, because I thought there must have been something about me, there must have been something wrong with me, or this wouldn't have happened. Why is this happening to me? It's not happening to me, it's happening next to me, or it's happening at me. It's not happening to me. I'm not the object, I'm the observer. Anyway, magnet, junkyard, junk. Step 4, what's the junk? The rest of the steps demagnetize the magnet and the junk falls off. And then you find out what you really are, which, as this same friend of mine puts it, is a lamp. Yes, a lamp. By the way, it's a great image because the lamp needs to be plugged in or it can't do its job. If it's plugged into the electricity grid, it will shine. But the work needs to be done first. God is not available in my consciousness until this junk is out of the way. 2 types of junk. first type of junk, all the things you did wrong. And that's what's super available to me when I'm doing step 4, is I'm really clear what is wrong with you. And that's why the resentment inventory, it meets me where I am at the point of doing a step 4 and says, right, what are you angry about? What are you upset about? What are you disappointed about? I didn't connect. I had no idea how angry I was. I probably have no idea about how angry I still am. I'll find out in about 5 years. But I was a lot worse. This is after the work, so just imagine what I was like before. So any kind of negative upset, my whole life, I thought I felt bad because of what you had done. No. I feel bad because of how I interpret what you've done, which means no one has ever made me feel anything. And I always know I'm back in the problem when I believe that you make me feel a certain way. Now, before we get to that first column, what happened? The agency, I work for agencies. They send me work, I do the work, I send it back. Very little human contact, just fine. My human contact is in all my other areas. First column, the agency. Second column, they criticize my work. Now, I could write a whole essay about why they criticize my work and why it's so wrong. I just need the fact. What's happened? They've criticized my work. The third column, what I discover is I'm not unhappy because of the criticism. I'm unhappy because what I perceive does not match my plan for reality. My plan for reality is my plan that if I get these things, I will be happy. So the first thing I find out in personal relations is that I have, so we say which of the 7 areas of self is affected. First 2 I look at, personal relations, sex relations. I must have had a plan, or I wouldn't have known that you had done something wrong. The reason I know you've done something wrong is because in my mind I've said, that doesn't match the plan. So what's the plan? The plan, apparently, is no one must criticize me for anything, ever, under any circumstances, even if they're right. Even if I need to be corrected, I'd rather continue doing it wrong. That's the plan. So if I can live my life in such a way that no one ever criticizes me, we're good. But until then, I'm going to be watching and listening very carefully for the slightest sign of criticism. It could be an overt criticism. You're a terrible person, you've done this wrong. It could be the eyebrow raises. The mouth doesn't break into a smile. But the resentment is the same. They criticized me. Why am I upset? I have a plan. Why do I have a plan? Why do I have a plan for other people's treatment of me, my personal relations with the other person? Well, with the agency, it's pretty clear. I need money. And if this agency doesn't provide me money because I don't trust God, then there will be no other agency. There is no other source. So I've made this agency my higher power. I no longer trust God, so it affects my pocketbooks. Old-fashioned word, it affects my financial situation. I have a plan. I need constant income from a certain source, and then we're good. And then we've got security and ambitions. The ambition is to be seen as the best. I'm a translator. The best translator that agency knows. If they criticize me, I'm clearly not in that position. So my ego has said, I'm okay as long as I'm the best. And you want to know where that came from? Well, my family, at school I came first in something at some point. Everyone comes first in something at some point. Doesn't matter what it is. I came first in something. My mother said, that means you now have to come first every time because you can come first, and if you don't, it's because you didn't try hard enough. Click. That's now in the philosophy of life. The philosophy of life now has 3 elements. I know there are no overachievers in the room, so none of you will identify with this. So this has affected my ambitions. And then we get to pride and self-esteem. For the purposes of step 4, pride is where I'm worried about what you think about me. Self-esteem is when I'm worried about what my image of me. And again, my image of me that my ego wants me to have, I'm not okay unless I have this image, is I am the perfect translator. You need to think of me as that as well. And now with this little resentment that I can have on a good day and with 100,000 meetings and some prayer and meditation, I can receive an email where the subject line, they want you to know straight away there's a problem. The subject line has the 2 most frightening words in the English language. Client feedback. That's client feedback. It's never going to be good when it says client feedback. Now, there was a time when in cartoons, when the character's stomach, like the duck's stomach, literally hits the floor, it drops to... That's exactly how I felt. This is affecting me physically. And I get a rush of chemicals and a rush of anger and fear and all sorts of other things. If I'm going to be happy, I can do one of 2 things. I can either bring the universe under my unchallenged rule, or I can drop my plan. 2 buttons. Which are you going to press? I tried one for a long time. It doesn't work. I still try it occasionally just to see if the button works. It doesn't work. So I'm left with number 2. There is a Sufi poet called Rumi who said, you can either carpet the whole world, cover the whole world in carpet, or you can buy a pair of slippers. And so the smart thing to do is to buy the pair of slippers. And to me, what I need to do once I've got these first 3 columns written down is to recognize that you're not the problem, I'm not the problem, my plan is the problem. Where did the plan come from? It came from my ego. I'm going to withdraw my loyalty towards that voice. They said to me in early AA, you need to ask your head where it gets its information from. They also say the head, that the alcoholic mind is like a closed economic system. One half of it produces rubbish, the other half of it buys the rubbish. I can't stop my ego producing rubbish. If you're on the planet, you're going to have an ego. The job is to stop listening to it. Or if you listen to it, to at least recognize, aha, that's my ego lying to me again. Aha, that's my ego lying to me again. This is not true. And a great meditation is whenever your head is really bad, to simply name the thoughts as they are coming past, rather than the agency will never call me again. So my mind is telling me that the agency will never call me again. This is untrue. And simply to name the thought, state it to be untrue. Don't argue why it's untrue. Just state it to be untrue. Because if you argue with the devil on the devil's ground, the devil always wins. If you and arguing with your ego, for me it's like playing chess with a pigeon. It won't play by any of the rules. It knocks over the pieces, and then it struts around the board like it won. People in recovery or out of recovery who want an argument are similar, and I can be the same. I can be the pigeon. So when I realise, just a footnote, this is an Al-Anon tip. When you realise you're playing pigeon chess, step away from the board and go and dig something in the garden. Go and plump a pillow. Because at least when you plump the pillow stays plumped. It doesn't argue back. Anyway, back to step 4. If I'm going to be comfortable, I need to drop the plans and say all I need to do to be okay is to stay sober and help another alcoholic achieve sobriety, or whatever the program phrase is, and in the meantime be useful and cheerful and as kind as I can to the people around me. That is it. I don't need anything to go my way to be okay. But I still haven't got rid of the resentment. The way I get rid of the resentment is through forgiveness. And forgiveness is not saying, you're a terrible person, but I'm kind and I'm going to forgive you. Forgiveness, in my book, is to withdraw my judgment in the first place. No one asked me to judge, so I withdraw my right to judge in the first place. My friend Nadia, 25 years ago, not in recovery, didn't need to be in recovery, would say, it's not a good thing, it's not a bad thing, it's a thing. It's just a thing. But then I've got to withdraw my sense that there is something evil about the person. And what it says in the big book is that they, like me, are sick too. And what sickness in this context means is separated from their higher power. When in some countries the electricity goes down, the mains electricity goes down, you have to turn the generator on. And the generator makes a horrible smell and a horrible noise, but at least you have some temporary power until the generator breaks down. When I'm separated from my higher power, the generator comes on automatically. The generator is my ego. If they're behaving badly, they're separated from their higher power and the generator has come on. It makes a horrible noise and it stinks. They have power, but it's not the right power, and there are terrible side effects. But they can't help the design. They did not design themselves. I did not create me. If I feel shame about myself, it means I've taken responsibility for my own creation, like I created me and made a mistake. Which means I'm sitting in God's seat. God wants his seat back, apparently. So I'm not in a position to judge. If other people behave badly, it is because they are separated from their higher power. Someone who is connected is automatically harmless. If someone is not harmless, they're disconnected. And the best thing I can do is be an example of connection. And I'll give you an example of connection. My other half, so I'm married to a man. You're allowed to do that in the UK. He's called Jonathan. A good Jewish name. You might say he's not Jewish. I've been with him for 15 years. Before him, I was with someone in recovery for 10 years called James. And when I'd been with Jonathan for 2 years, we were with my mother one weekend. And my mother's French. She grew up in France during the war. Some bad things happened. So I can see where lots of the damage came from. My grandfather was in camps. It was awful. My mother said to Jonathan, I don't know if you can do a French accent, and have a go. Jonathan, I like you. Oh, but I loved James. I mean, the knives were flying in all directions. Duck. Now, in my alcoholism, I would respond to that badly. But you know what he did? He's got such a barrier against rubbish. He just laughed, and not in a mocking way, in a gentle way. And all of the bad energy left the room. And it was fine. She never tried that with him again. The only way to stop the game is to not play the game. But the game has got to stop. It's no good stopping the game on the outside, but continuing to play the game on the inside. Which is why it says on 67, we avoid retaliation and argument even in our own minds. And when I've prayed to have a kindly and tolerant view of others, it has always been given. It has always been given, whoever they are, whatever they have done. And if any problem is going to be solved, I need to recognize that the other person or the other group of people or the other nation or whatever it is that I'm bothered by is me. That if I'd been born there, I'd probably think the way that they think. And I've had cosmic resentments against whole groups of people and whole nationalities. I've lived in some very difficult countries. And against the whole of humanity. I mean, very egalitarian. This was progress. At least everyone is getting resented for the same reason in the same way. But this is me that I'm looking at. As soon as you're over there and I'm over here and we're different and we have different interests, we're sunk. Nothing will be solved. And this is true for me on a personal level and on every other level. The only way I can be free is to have unity with the whole of humanity. And Native Americans will say, when you make a decision, you consider the next 7 generations. Not just now, you consider the welfare of the next 7 generations. So I've got to remove the barrier to that. The fear inventory, I don't do any analysis. I write a list of fears. And then the big book says, we asked ourselves why we had these fears. Now it knows that you're going to give the wrong answer. So it gives you the right answer in the form of a question so that you're not offended. It's very smart. It says, wasn't it because self-reliance failed us? What is self? It's the ego monster. I've relied on the ego monster. What for? For my perception of the universe. And my perception of the universe is I'm at the center, I'm a physical body, I'm under threat, stay away. That's why I was frightened. I was frightened because of my perception. That is the self-reliance that has failed me. Oh, and footnote, if you go through life like that, you're going to make a lot of enemies. Stuff is not going to work out. You're going to bring about the very thing that you fear. So one of my mother's difficulties, she wants to be connected. She's frightened that she's not going to be connected. So she says things like, "You don't want to be here with me. You can go now." That's her way of getting love from me. Can you see how that's not going to work? If I'm not in the right space and I respond to the surface, I'm going to be, oh well, if that's how you feel, I'm going to go. But I've learnt to look beyond the surface to the person inside. What do they really need? They need connection. So to get rid of fear out of my life, and it surely comes back, but to get rid of fear, I recognize Psalm 91. I'm the eagle, or whatever it is. We're not sure about the bird, about the species, but it's a bird that lives in a high place so that the animals can't get to the eggs. So that the wings are over the eggs, which means I'm an egg. I'm not who I'm going to become. I'm still the egg. I'm safe. I'm protected. Now, do I have a role? And then when I act out of that space, the fear goes. The so-called sex inventory is really a conduct inventory. Thank heaven it's not actually about sex. It's about poor conduct. And the questions are straightforward. That's on page 69. But it says an interesting thing. It says that once we've worked out what we're doing wrong in relationships, and I've had to use lots of checklists of good behaviour and bad behaviour in relationships to identify where I'm going wrong. It says we mould a sane and sound ideal for our future conduct. And then it says, and this is the great line, in other words, we treat sex as we would any other problem, which means it's just told me how to solve any problem. So on my phone, I have a sane and sound ideal which covers every area of my life where I have problems, and every individual relationship where I have problems, with the ideal towards which I'm willing to grow, the corrective measure. So when I'm doing inventory at night, or something goes wrong, I go to that list and say, am I simply failing to do what's on the list, or is the list wrong? Do I need to remove something from the list? Do I need to add something from the list? Am I in a new situation? My life is 1,000 times bigger now than it was when I came in. The corrective measures when I was 21 are not the corrective measures today. They are different corrective measures. So this gets changed.
You have an example.
Just find it. Let me see. Okay, so in the area of my relationship with God, I've got three corrective measures. The first one is trust that following God's guidance is sufficient.
Say it again.
Trust that following God's guidance is sufficient. Because sometimes I pray to God and I say, what do you want me to do today? And the list is something like, visit your mother, take some bananas, remember the these, remember the those, do 3 hours work, make the dinner, make the bed, play with the kitten, answer the phone. And I'm like, how can this, you're kidding. This is enough. This is enough for my life. This is enough for the problems I see around me. Apparently it is, because God on that day has not revealed anything else. So I need to just trust. That's why it's on the ideal. I need to trust that's enough. Second element, do not worry about purpose or meaning. These are a function of following God's will. Do not worry about purpose or meaning. These are a function of following God's will. One of my favourite questions, stemming from my childhood, is, what's the point? And it's not really a question, it's more of a statement. And you look at the world, you look at society from the wrong angle, and you can wonder what the point of anything is. And I've got to not go there. I've got to trust that if there is a point, my part is sufficient in whatever that purpose is. I won't get to see what that purpose is. When my brother was at university, he studied philosophy. Of course he studied philosophy. And my mother met one of his philosophy professors and said, why did he leave university a few weeks before graduating to commit suicide? And they said, by that point, he was an undergraduate. They said by that point, he was teaching them, they weren't teaching him. And he left some of his philosophy notes in a folder, and he left a letter that he wrote to a friend in the middle of the night, but didn't send, about his alcoholism. My mother burns everything, but she hadn't burnt this folder. I don't know why she hadn't found it. It was the one thing left of my brother. I found this folder drunk in the middle of the night in a place, I don't know why I looked in that place, because it was a place I never went. I had no business looking there. I looked in the place. I found the folder. I read the letter. He described his alcoholism as like sitting on top of a volcano, and alcohol was the only thing stopping the volcano from exploding. And it was 2 weeks later, I was walking through the hall and called an organisation I'd never heard of. So what was the meaning and purpose of him writing that letter in the middle of the night to someone? He didn't send the letter. And I'm telling you this story now. I don't know what the purpose of me telling you this story is now. Maybe it will have another purpose. I'm not in a position to judge meaning or purpose. If I try and work that out, it'll kill me. And just one last thing, and then we'll break. My identity, another favourite question of the alcoholic. Who am I? The answer is this: I am part of humanity. Full stop. End of answer. That's who I am. As soon as I add anything to that, other things may be true. You know, I was born with a French passport, this is true. But it's not who I am. Lots of things are true. But my identity is that. So those are 3 corrective measures. Those are the ideas I'm growing towards. And with some other ones, it's... one of them is, when I'm angry, don't answer the phone. If I have to answer the phone, lie down on the floor and then answer the phone. It's really hard to shout when you're lying on your back. And I know because I've tried. It changes where your voice comes from. It's amazing. And I've got lots of those. So that's the end of step 4. We now have some material for step 5. I'm going to talk about steps 5 through 9 in the next session. So let's go and eat food. Thank you.
I'd just like to make a few short announcements before we start.
Oh yes, just one. Can I just do the intro to the announcement? So the reason I'm here, as I say, is because Gidon said, "Why don't you come?" So I said, "I'll come." So I booked some tickets, and so I paid for my own tickets and hotel. I understand a small contribution is being paid to cover some of the expenses, but that's not the point. I think the main thing for the collection is to cover the costs of the day. Do you want to? Is there anything else to say?
Yeah, there's a few things. Anyone who came during the first 2 sessions and hasn't paid, please come to the registration during lunch and pay. We're going to be practicing Tradition 7, being self-supporting, and pass this around. There's an ask a basket on the registration table. Anyone who has a question that wants him to answer in the afternoon sessions, they can ask. The lunch break will end at 2:30, and someone just notified us that they can't translate in the afternoon session, so if anyone can and is willing to translate, please come to OSHA and let her know. Thank you.
Yeah.
You have to go into the ask it basket.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, please.
Jump.
Yeah.
So if you ever jump, you don't have any